All right, folks. This is the Dark Lord of Optics livecast, episode 16, where we are going to mostly answer questions. And if there aren't a whole lot of questions, I might be able to go to sleep early. As a comment on one of my YouTube videos, somebody has critiqued my introductory technique, where they usually apparently people in YouTube videos say how happy they are to be there, do a happy dance, click their heels. I don't know what else they do. Fair warning, I'm not going to do any of that. This is about as excited and excitable as I get. But then again, I have it on a good authority that none of you guys are here to for my incredible social skills, right? I sure as hell hope not. If you are, you people are sick. But anyhow, that having been taken care of. And all right, we have Thomas here. Hi, Thomas. Thank you for chiming in. I actually have your question, and I will address it. So I am in a hotel room in Dallas. I'm traveling this week, so I don't have all my props and things like that. I do have some number of questions that came in via Facebook, Instagram, Sniper's Hide, private messages, and I will address some of those. But the primary purpose here is to address the questions you guys may ask live. Normally, I have a long speech and topic and all this. I am beginning to get so many questions I can't cover it all, so I want to start doing them in live casts. And just for the record, Mr. Brian Hogan is here for my looks. Well, Brian is from New York, so my expectations are low. With me today is Mr. Derek from Northwest Guns. I figured if you guys have more gun-related questions for a lot of those, he's better equipped to answer than I am. So we'll tag team and see what works.
Sounds like a plan.
All right. Anyhow, so let's see what we have. There are a few people watching already, so if you guys have a question, type it in the comment. Otherwise, I am going to address a few that I received. Thomas Shoemaker, who is listening but is having some internet issues, asked a question on YouTube. I'm going to open it, and I will sort of summarize it. So the basic original question that Thomas had was whether I'm interested in doing a video comparing different light transmission of different rifle scopes during different conditions: fog, sun, morning, noon, dusk, that kind of stuff. And Thomas's take on this is that for hunting during the last, I guess, first 15 minutes of light, he believes that light transmission is very important. And I am going to do my best to disavow him of that. Okay. And here is why. What you're looking for in a scope for poor light is the quote-unquote low light performance. And there are multiple factors to this, and that alone may be worth a video. But fundamentally, a lot of people are convinced that light transmission of rifle scope is what makes a rifle scope look better in low light, or as they usually phrase it, look brighter. And for modern rifle scopes, it is simply not the case. What you think looks brighter may not necessarily be brighter. What you think looks like it gives you more in low light is not necessarily more light going through the scope. The perceived brightness of an image, or what you're getting through the scope, depends on a ton of things. And small changes in overall amount of light are not really that big of a deal. I'm going to give you an example. With the modern rifle scopes that all have modern coatings, you can have a rifle scope that transmits 85% of light that's coming in, or 92% of light. So this 7% difference is not something your eye can detect. Your eye absolutely cannot make a difference. The way a human eye perceives brightness is logarithmic, and 7% difference is absolutely in the noise. However, what your eye does see, it does see color, it does see contrast, okay? And it does, okay, Derek, I'm gonna mute you for a moment, there's some background. It does see color, does see contrast. And how contrast is rendered is what will make one optic look brighter to you than the other. It may actually have less light transmission. My favorite example from years ago was with a couple of Collis scopes. And it so happened I had to chew them at the same time. They made the Collis KX and Collis CL, I believe, at the same time. And I had 3-9 and by 42 versions of the same scope. They're both very, very nice scopes. Always liked Collis hunting scopes. And the Collis CL was a slightly more sophisticated design with an extra lens element, a field flattener, and side focus, a couple other things. Despite the fact that I could measure with instrumentation that the Collis KX actually had a little bit more light coming through, in difficult lighting conditions, Collis CL that had less light coming through, it had an extra a lens or two. It actually looked brighter because it was a slightly better optical system. It had slightly better contrast, and it allowed you to discern things better in low light. Okay, so Thomas, I think that answers your question. If you really want some sort of a comparison, different lighting conditions, I can come up with a couple of things. I was thinking about doing some stuff along those lines, but it's not terribly useful thing, because if you are looking for low light performance, you should be looking at scopes with bright colors, a good contrast, things like that. The best example of that is probably Leica Magnus, which is spectacularly good in low light. But there are scopes over there with high overall light transmission. But the way Leica Magnus, for example, handles color and contrast makes all the difference in the world. Okay. All right. I hope that answers your question, Thomas. Okay. No, so Thomas is commenting that I'm guessing it comes down to lens coatings to create enhanced saturation. No, coatings, some better scopes have slightly better coatings, but overall high quality coatings are fairly ubiquitous nowadays. Even fairly inexpensive ones often have pretty high quality coatings. It is the overall system design, the way the lens systems are designed, the way the objective is designed, combined with the appropriate coatings and all that. The best way to think about it is overall system design. Leica can design a better scope than NC Star. That's just it. NC Star can make a scope with very high light transmission, but they don't know how to make a scope that will work as well in low light as a Leica, for example. Okay. All right, I'm gonna unmute Derek and see. So Derek, before I move on to something else, any commentary on that? Anything you want to add?
No.
Okay, that was simple.
I can honestly say I am not, I'm still learning when it comes to a lot of the optic stuff. So
yeah, well, like this particular question was right up my alley. These are the things I deal with for a living. Okay. All right. Corey asked me a question on sniper side. It was a very detailed question about a variety of different low power variable scopes. And I am going to glance at it real quick. I have the sniper side private messages open. There's Corey's question. I will just summarize it very briefly and see if I can offer some thoughts. So Corey has several different AR type rifles of different lengths, some blackout 556, a couple of those, and a 308. And he's essentially trying to figure out how to find a high quality, low power variable that can do up close CQB stuff, but also have good capability at distance. And the basic criteria for distance is that it needs to do better than his 4-power ACOG that he currently has on what he calls his mid-range gun, which is a 14.5-inch 556 rifle. The 3 specific scopes that Corey mentions are the Night Force Attacker 128, Vortex Razor Gen 3, and Vortex Razor Gen 2E. Corey gets discounts on all these optics, so I'm not going to quote what all of this stuff is going to cost him. Thank you for your service, Corey. Okay. Honestly, all of the scopes you're looking at are good scopes. I don't think there is a dud in there. Attacker 1-8 is excellent. Razor Gen 3 1-10 is excellent. Razor Gen 2E 1-6 is excellent. They all do slightly different things. If you're looking for a true general purpose AR-15, where you want an optic to really get it to an extent of a practical reach of the cartridge, your best bet is one of the front focal plane LPVOs, the Attacker F1 or the Razor Gen 3. Razor Gen 2 works very, very nicely, but it being second focal plane limits it a little bit at longer distances because your ability to compensate for wind is diminished with that scope compared to the more sophisticated reticles of the two front focal plane scopes you mentioned. Between those two, so I make no secret that I prefer the Razor Gen 3 because it costs a little bit less than the Attacker, and because its field of view is wider. But honestly, between the two of them, in terms of performance, isn't a ton of difference. I have a slight preference to Gen 3, but honestly, look at the reticles and see what works better for you. I decided to stick with the Gen 3. And that the Razor Vortex Razor Gen 3, and tell me if this kind of a configuration sounds familiar to you. The rifle that the Razor Gen 3 sits on is a 56 AR-15. It has a 16-inch proof research carbon fiber barrel. It is stupid accurate, but because it is a carbon fiber barrel, the rifle is light enough to have quick handling, and I am just as comfortable taking it to a carbine class where it will sit on 1 power and blast targets up close, as I am to a DMR type class where I'm going to be shooting targets out to 800 yards or thereabouts. And the scope will not let me down and the rifle will not let me down. At altitude where I live, Hornady's Superformance 56 ammo is supersonic just past 900 yards, and I've taken it that far. And the rifle holds up, and the scope, in this case Razor Gen 3, holds up. So if I were scoping it, that's the choice I make. But in terms of practical performance, you're not going to see any real difference between Razor Gen 3 and Night Force Attacker 1-8. However, with the Razor Gen 2, pushing the range past 500-600 yards gets harder because of wind issues. Okay, Corey, I hope that answers your questions. If you want any clarification, any follow-ups, please put it in the comments. Okay. Derek, any takes on LPVOs?
No, I have looked at the Gen 3 Razor. It looks like it's a nice LPVO. I've only had a couple of them I've actually used. One was the primary arms with the KISS reticle. That wasn't a bad one. That was a 1-8 first focal plane. Mm-hmm. And then, excuse me, I'm coming away from a cold from last week. The Gen 2 was it Vortex Viper 1-6.
Oh, the PST, yeah. That's like a mini Razor. It's a nice scope.
It's not a bad one. Was really shocked on how well it actually was. Yeah. It was very nice, but I'm not much of an LPVO guy. I probably will put a 3-gun rifle together later this year to play around with, because we do have a lot of 3-gun competitions right down the road from my house.
It's nice to live in Montana, right?
Right. So.
Yeah, well, now talk to me when you're ready to put one together. But in terms of bang for the buck, PST Gen 2 does very, very well. So it's an interesting sort of design. Optically, it's quite good, but there are other good scopes over there. But one of the things that Vortex did really, really well with that design is they did the eyepiece right. It's not quite like the Razor, but it has a similar feel. It has a similar reticle, similar type of illumination, and it is a surprisingly respectable scope. in the $800-ish range or thereabouts. It's basically, PST Gen 2. If you want to add a little money, there is a Delta Striker 126. They work along the same lines. And they both have nicely visible illuminated dot. Makes a big difference, especially on 1 power. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Also, Corey commented. Yeah, so leaning Gen 3. And he has a PST. So, Corey, do you have a PST Gen 1, which was a 1 to 4, or PST Gen 2, which is the 1 to 6? Right. As if you have a PST Gen 2 1 to 6 and you want to extend the range, Razor Gen 2 is not going to give you too much of that, but Gen 3 or the Attacker certainly will. So, Derek, Rashad is asking if you want to offer a little bit of what you're up to, what your background is, and just so that people know what kind of questions to pose.
Okay. My background is in law enforcement and military contracting. I do a lot of long-range shooting. I got into PRS for the first time last year. And NRL, I really enjoyed it. I've built, since then, 2 rifles, one for me, one for my son, over the winter so far, and I'm putting together 2 ELO rifles for a 2-mile shootout. That's happening later this year with me and another content creator, mutual friend of ours. So it looks like it's going to be a good year for that, and I love firearms. I love the mechanical aspects of them. I love building them. So if anybody ever has any questions, feel free to ask. Plus, I also reload all my own ammunition, so reloading is a big thing in my house.
Very good, thank you. Okay. Yeah, so I'm more of an optics guy who shoots guns. Derek is more of a gun guy who also has optics, right? So there's a little bit of complementary expertise here. Anyhow, so Corey commented. So Corey currently has a PST Gen 2 1 to 6. Yeah, so this is your jumping point. You need serious jumping capability. You should be going Razor Gen 3 or Attacker. Okay. All right, let's see. Okay. Anything you can say about Nikon optics? Honestly, not too much. I have some limited experience with Nikon's large laser rangefinders, and they seem to be well made, but not a ton. Beyond that, they do some digital night vision stuff. I just haven't had enough hands-on time with it to have any strong opinions. Okay. And same user, sight in S3SS competition 45 by 45 ED. Would you say this is a good scope for 2 to 3 target rifle? Honestly, so any high power, fixed power, high magnification scope like this is a very, very specialized thing. It's a bench rest scope. If this is a general purpose target rifle, I probably would not go with this scope. If this is a bench rest type rifle, where it's sitting in a vise on a bench, you know exactly where the target is, then it's actually a pretty decent design. I thought the optics were pretty good. I'm not big on many IR scopes. This is one of the newer designs, and I have limited hands-on time with it, but a few people I know use them, and they are happy. So the answer to this question is really needs a little bit more specificity in terms of what is a 2 to 3 target rifle to you. Me personally, if it's a general purpose target rifle, I prefer variable designs, partly because I seldom shoot just for groups at one distance. There's always something else happening. Okay. All right, let's see. Okay. Dan how? I'm sorry. I speak with an accent. If I mispronounce your name, just blame it to the whole immigrant thing. Okay. You've talked about apparent field of view. Is that the only factor that figures into the effect where the tube disappears from view? Is there a stat that we can look at to know a scope will have that happen? No, unfortunately not. Apparent field of view helps a scope disappear from view. Apparent field of view is basically how large an image will look to you. But it doesn't guarantee that the housing will start disappearing. Probably the best example of design like that historically was Hensoldt, but Vortex Razor Gen 2 is very good at this, and a few others as well. There is nothing in the specifications that I'm aware of that will tell you how well the eyepiece housing will disappear from view when you're looking through the scope. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but this is where it's difficult to replace being hands-on with a particular scope. Okay. All right, Derek, you're welcome to chime in, but I don't think you'll say anything different on this one. This is unfortunately where you just have to look at these things. Do you have? Are there any scopes? I know you've been looking at some scopes from a few makers that I don't normally look at. Anything you can think of that you can say where you look at it and the housing of the eyepiece just kind of vanishes off, becomes like a very thin versus being a prominent black ring around the image?
Actually, yes. Recently, I just got the Element Optics Titan, and for being the size optic that it is, it's really nice. It actually, when you can look past it and look through it, and it doesn't seem like it's there, but it is. It's a really nice optic for the money, and it's under $1,000.
Yeah, they did a really good job with the Titan. Okay. Moving on, another question from Thomas Shoemaker. I recently discovered that there are 20 MOA bases and 20 MOA scope rings. If I couple 20 MOA bases and rings with a Vortex Diamondback Tactical, could I extend my MOA, meaning how much available adjustment you have, from 65 to 105? That's not quite how this math works, right? So if your scope has 65 MOA of adjustment, and when you've zeroed everything, it's exactly dead center, that means you have 32.5 of up adjustment available, right? And if all of that falls in together and you swap out for 20 MOA bases, ignoring potential, sighting fluctuations and stuff like that, you'll have, 52.5 minutes of angle of adjustment available, because what happens is that the inclined base shifts your zero position from being in the center of the adjustment range of the scope toward being a little bit more toward one side. Okay. If you add 20 MOA bases and 20 MOA scope rings, there's a really good chance you will no longer be able to zero the scope at 100 or 200 yards. Because remember, you have from zero natively a bit over 30 minutes of angle of adjustment. If you try to dial in 40, you'll just hit the limit of adjustment without being able to sight in, right? In this case, I would not recommend adding that much. I don't like to sit anywhere that close to the very edge of adjustment. I've seen all sorts of nonlinearities there, and they vary from scope to scope, so it can be a can of worms. However, if you're trying to maximize available adjustment, adding a 20 MOA inclined base to most rifles is kind of one of those things where there is very little downside to it. Because you're still close enough to the center where you still have good optical quality, but you end up with a little bit more adjustment range. Almost everything I have sits in some sort of an inclined 20 or 30 MOA base, and I have not really found any issues with it with most conventional scopes. Derek, I know you talked a little bit about building a few longer range rifles. So how do you set up your inclined bases, rings? How do you go about this?
Well, first it depends on the scope. And he's already said he has a Diamondback Tactical. Those are usually about 65 MOA, roughly to 70. Sometimes you get lucky and get a 70. But with that particular scope, I wouldn't go more than like a 30 MOA base. I wouldn't do 20 MOA rails and a 20 MOA base, because you're going to bottom out the scope, which means you're going to have to zero that rifle at probably 300 yards minimum. You might be able to get away with 2, but you're looking more at 3. So for that particular scope, I wouldn't go more than a 30 MOA base. Honestly, you're good with 20. With that scope, you should be able to get out to 800 to 1,000. 800 for sure, but 1,000 is going to be a little rough considering you don't have a lot of internal adjustment on that one. But it can be done. Just learn how to use your EBR7C reticle if that's the one you have, or unless you have the EBR2, which was the first generation of the Diamondback tap.
Okay. Sorry, I missed a little bit of that. I ran out of coffee, and that's a cardinal offense. Okay. All right. Moving on. Let's see. Another Thomas Campbell. Any recommendations for target hunting 2 to 10, 2 to 12 power scope around $1,000? Honestly, I mean, so for 2 to 10 power, I mean, probably one of the better available options is Leupold VX5. But if it's target and hunting, I'd probably be inclined to look at something like a 3 to 15 or thereabouts. And if you look at the 3 to 15, my nowadays almost standard recommendation is Vortex Razor HD LHT 3 to 15 by 42. It's not very heavy. It has good magnification range. It is very, very good optical. I think it's a little bit better than the Leupold VX5, although both are nice scopes. Nice exposed turret, usable reticle. I think for this, I would say Vortex Razor HDL HT 3 to 15 by 42 would be my recommendation. But if you wanted 2 to 10, I think Leupold VX5 has a lot to recommend itself. Okay. Derek, do you play with this kind of type hunting scopes or not so much?
Not as much. I usually stick with the traditional 3 to 9 by 40.
Okay, yeah.
I might play around with a 4 to 14 by 44 this year.
Which one?
I'm not sure yet. There's a couple different ones out there I've been looking at, but I don't know. We'll have to see what happens more when the summertime comes to see if I'm actually able to go hunting yet this year.
Okay. Well, that's fair. Okay. So Corey, that's the gentleman who asked a question about low power variables. I am glad you enjoyed it. You got your question answered. I think I like this format more than answering everything in the written form, because what happens is that you guys send me a question. Usually I have follow-up questions because I need more information to give you a good answer, and we end up sending messages back and forth for a while, and in the end I run out of time and don't sleep. I've learned to enjoy sleeping, so I think we'll do this on livecast form. It seems to be working all right. Okay. What size MOA red dot do you recommend on a rifle? That kind of depends on what rifle and what you're doing with. Good example of full-on questions, right? And it also depends on whether you have astigmatism or not. There is this drive. A lot of people keep on saying that for a rifle use is you want the smallest dot possible. Well, that's not necessarily the case. What happens is that if you have a red dot sight with a very small dot, and you have even mild astigmatism, it will not look that small. It will bloom considerably. But if you try to dim the illumination level, you won't be able to see it. Somewhat paradoxically, with a larger size dot, you can run it slightly less bright and it still be very visible because it's physically larger. And it is a little bit more forgiving of astigmatism. So it's a little bit counterproductive. When I have a choice for red dot sights, if I'm not shooting with a magnifier, i.e. if I'm shooting at typical red dot sight distances, I personally prefer slightly larger dot. Because let's go on extreme. For example, on pistols, I really like 8 MOA dot or something like that. Why? Okay, so 8 minutes of angle inside of 50 yards covers no more than 4 inches of the target, right? I'm not exactly shooting mosquitoes here. What is it that I may need to shoot inside of 50 yards where 4-inch dot will cover up too much, right? On a rifle where it might be 100, 150 yards, even then, at 8 MOA dot would not stop me. But I tend to stick to 3 to 6 MOA dots, and I very, very seldom go smaller. The one exception to that is holographic sights or red dot sights that have a proper pattern of some sort, right? That have a dot inside a circle, like the circle of death of the EOTAC and Vortex UH1, or have some sort of a holdover, that kind of stuff. If it's a circle, if it's a dot inside a circle, then 2 MOA dot is a good idea. But if it's just a dot, I tend to go a little bit larger. Okay. Any comments before we move on?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. All right. I think we answered Thomas's question on adjustments. Thank you, Derek. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And Gilberto, why do different scopes with the same objective size transmit more or less light into the shooter's eye? How much light is actually transmitted to the shooter's eye? Why do manufacturers claim they have, okay, there's a follow-up, they have XXX light transmission when that transmission isn't actually transmitted into the shooter's eye? Okay, well, this is right up my alley. So, I'll answer the last question first. Why do manufacturers claim that they have so much transmitted if it isn't actually transmitted to the shooter's eye? Manufacturers can claim anything they want, but manufacturers, if they're not complete idiots, usually don't claim how much light actually gets into your eye. Okay? They tell you how much light percentage-wise comes out of the scope. They have no idea what actually makes it into your eye, and nor can they. They have no idea, right? What if you are left eye dominant, you're aiming with your right eye, and it's closed, right? So how much light gets in there? Not a whole lot. The way everybody interprets the amount of light that gets into your eye gets a little bit kooky. The formal definition of light transmission, barring some other more technical details, basically there is some amount of light incident on the objective lens of a scope, and there is some amount of light coming out of the eyepiece of the scope, right? What comes out divided by what came in is the percentage of light that is actually transmitted. All right. Whatever is not transmitted is lost due to a couple of different mechanisms. The predominant one generally is reflection. Light goes through a variety of different lens to air interfaces, and at every interface a little bit gets reflected. How much actually gets reflected depends on how good the coatings are. They're called anti-reflection coatings to make sure as little as possible gets reflected. If the glass material itself is not of very good quality, there will also be some absorption and some scattering through various non-uniformities in the optics themselves. But honestly, that for good quality scopes, that's usually not a major factor. The part where everybody seems to get wrong is that they say, this scope has 96% transmission, that's why I don't need a large objective. If you want a lot of light to your eye, you need a large objective lens, large diameter objective lens, right? There is a significant difference in the overall amount of light between a 40 and a 50 millimeter scope. For example, I'm going to pull up my calculator and give you an exact number. But basically, if nothing else has changed and you have jumped and you have jumped up from 40 millimeter diameter objective to 50 millimeter diameter objective, if all else is being equal, the total amount of light available to your eye is, I think, what, 56%, something like that? Is, yes, approximately 56% larger. Okay, 50%, 56%, something your eye can actually see. Now, it doesn't mean that all of that is usable information that gives you a good image. That may not necessarily be the case. However, there will be perceptible difference in the amount of light. Okay. How much of it gets to your eye is tricky and not hugely relevant. If all goes well, you want the exit pupil of the rifle scope to be larger than the entrance pupil of your human eye, so that your eye can move around a little bit and sample different portions of what's coming out and generally be relaxed and have a lot of information available to it. When you think about how we process an image, you shouldn't be thinking so much about the amount of light, but you should be thinking about it in terms of the amount of information and the fidelity of that information, because that's how your eye absorbs all this stuff. The bad part is that marketing departments of most rifle scope companies don't know any of this sort of stuff, so I wouldn't go too much from the various marketing information that you get from them. Okay. All right. Let's see. Okay, so from Thomas Shoemaker. Yeah, Leopold VX3 IOHD is awesome for hunting, around a 3.5 to 10 by 50 on my 280. Yeah, it's a perfectly respectable scope. Honestly, I think the good stuff from Leopold starts at VX5. But the basic VX3i design has been around for 25, 30 years with comparatively minor updates, and it worked back then and still works now. But honestly, you can probably do better now for the money. Who actually makes all the optical glass? Is it 2, 3 companies or hundreds? It's in between. There are several large companies who make it, but there are a few smaller ones. It's not hugely critical who makes it, right? The largest one is probably Shot, and you see a bunch of scope companies proudly proclaim that they use Shot glass. On there, it makes no difference. Shot, O'Hara, a bunch of them, Kyocera. There are a bunch of companies that do different glass. Different companies have glass melt factories in different parts of the world. They all have extensive catalogs of different types of glass, and you basically get what you pay for. You can get very high quality stuff from most decent ones. So there's some that just peddle crap, but overall, there is a good number. I worked with a few over the years, and I can't tell you that one was substantially better than the other. Some are easier to deal with than others, but that's largely the extent of this thing, really. Okay. Do you run into this business a lot, Derek? Where is the glass coming from? Is it shot glass? Does it have the magic of shot glass?
I've had some people ask me that question, but mainly a lot of the questions I get when I work, I think on counter on my part-time job, is this scope made in China? If it is, I don't want it. Or is this one made in Japan? So more people are about over here in my area about like where it's being made and where it's from.
Okay. Oh, that's good. Yeah, this question of is it shot glass, etc., is the one that annoys me the most. Shot makes very good raw optical glass, but that by itself, is comparatively minor part of what goes into the scope. Okay. Mr. Lee Tintel is here. Thank you for joining in, Lee. So Thomas Shoemaker, who are your favorite scope manufacturers, and what scope could you not do without? Those are two somewhat different things. So I don't have a favorite scope manufacturer per se, but partly because I've been around for a while and I know a lot of different scope manufacturers and I have good relationships with quite a few of them. I'm exceedingly friendly with the guys from Vortex, Tangent Theta, Burris, Steiner. I have a good relationship with, very good relationship with Loopold, with Swamp Fox Optics, you name it. They're good people, and I want them all to do well. In terms of the product line, it also becomes very tricky because a company like Vortex, for example, Loopold and Burris, makes a broad range of products, and with many of them on the lower end, I may not like them very much. In the high end scopes, I like quite a bit. A good example is Vortex, right? I don't have anything particularly good to say about Vortex Crossfire, for example, and I'm a huge fan of almost the entire Vortex Razor product line because they are really good and they offer a lot for the money, right? And then there is some detail in between. There are smaller boutique manufacturers, guys like Tangent Theta or March. They don't make a bad scope, but they don't make an inexpensive scope, right? I have I have two Tangent Theta scopes. The cheap one is almost $4,000, right? That's the cheap one, 3,800, whatever it costs now. So it's not quite so simple. As far as what scope could you not do without, once or twice a year I redo this article called "If I Could Have Only One," and that kind of spells out what I want to have and what I don't want to have. Of the scopes I have on hand, there are a few that one day might be pried from my cold dead hand, and then I might put up a fight. And that's Tangent Theta 3 to 15 by 50 is one of those, and I'm increasingly fond of the Vortex Razor Gen 3. It clicks a lot of buttons for me. I recently had mine reset for different parallax distance, so now it's truly even more versatile than it was before. I'm a huge fan of my Alcan 4 power. As I'm sort of bearish on high-end prismatic scopes for the moment, but I'm not giving that one up. It's just wonderful. So there are a few like this, but honestly, as the industry develops and matures, I'm sure new and better stuff still coming up. Okay, Derek, what scope could you not do without?
Oh, what scope can I not do without?
Or have I not sent you that one yet?
To be honest, it would have to be my Right-On 525 by 56 Mod 7. I love that scope, even though it does not have a lot of internal adjustment. It's only at 20 mils, but it's a first focal plane and it's set up on a mil dot system. I have that on my 338, and I absolutely love that scope. So, but I hate to do this, but I'm going to have to jump off. I had something come up, and I'm going to go to work early, so I do apologize. Right. Thank you for letting me come on.
Thank you for joining, and like I said, I do this every 2 weeks. You're always invited. You have a permanent invitation.
Thank you, sir. I'll see you guys later. Thank you, everybody, for coming on tonight.
All right. Good night.
Good night.
Okay, where were we? Any thoughts on the Attacker 4-20 yet? I haven't seen one, and everything that I have, everything that I know about this particular attacker, I know from published specs and forums. I don't have any insight into Night Force. They hate my ass with passion. So in principle, it looks like an interesting configuration. It's a little bit heavier than I would have liked, but it looks like a competent design. It seems like there's a little bit of tunneling, which I don't like to see in new scopes these days, but it's not a game over by any stretch of imagination. I would really like to see how it does against Zero Compromise 4-20 on the high end, and against something like US Optics 3.2 to 17. That's a little bit less expensive. March 3 to 24 by 52. There is a new upcoming March 4.5 to 28 by 52. So there is some competition there. I've seen a good number of attackers over the years And I've never seen an attacker that was a bad scope, right? So I fully expect this one to be a nice scope as well, and I'm sure it will find its audience. I think the way, I suspect, I'm not sure, I think the way Nightforce is likely positioning this is that if you're shooting a 7-35 attack on your PRS rifle, you can shoot a 4-20 on a gas gun or rimfire rifle and have a similar look, feel, reticle, everything. I think it's a good idea, and I think it's a configuration that should do well for Nightforce. But until I get my hands on it and look at it more carefully, there isn't really much more that I can offer. What do you think about smart scopes? They've gotten better. I've been looking at the ATN X site, the latest and greatest, which is surprisingly decent. There are a few others coming up. For the time being, I think their time is still coming. I assume you're talking about digital type rifle scopes. If not, please clarify what exactly you're looking for. I think their time is coming, but for now, there are still some limitations. The eyepieces are getting better, but the objective, which is just a camera for digital rifle scopes, needs a little bit of work. I think they need to get a little bit better. So they're already usable. They're quite good, but I think I think they're almost there. Not quite there yet. Lee, how much do you think it would cost someone off the street to get a parallax reset on a Razer Gen 3? I honestly do not know. I also need to putz around a little bit and see what is appropriate. So I visited Vortex last week. I have some other reasons to visit them for some of the other things I do. And while I was at it, I took my Razer Gen 3 over and asked them nicely to reset the parallax to 300 yards, with the idea being that I want to carry focus on 10 power into longer distances to cut down a little bit on parallax, etc. But what happens if you do that? You are giving up high magnification, meaning 10 power. So performance at closer distances. It will probably not be perfectly focused at 100 yards, 150 yards anymore, may incur some parallax and all that. Now, for my purposes, that's an acceptable compromise because it's not a target scope. On 1 power, low magnification, it's going to be plenty sharp and fast and everything at closer ranges. That will work just fine for me. But I want to be able to use 10 power on longer distances better. The previous originally it was the parallax was set at 150 yards, which is the way they're set, and I found that on 10 power beyond 800 yards I was losing image focus a little bit. So that's and I take it bit out to 1000, 1100. So that's the problem I was trying to fix. But I have not yet had it on a rifle with a new parallax setting. I mean, I was in Wisconsin last week, and I have not been home yet, so I haven't tried shooting it yet. So I need to do that. If you have a Razer Gen 3 that you would like to have parallax reset on, well, I mean, you can generally ask Vortex. They are good guys, and they might be willing to just do it for you. If not, maybe there's a price. I really don't know. It didn't occur to me. But if you do ask them, let me know what they tell you, and I can see if there's anything I can do to help. Okay. Thomas, if I haven't exhausted you yet, what do you think about infrared scopes? Their prices seem to wildly vary, and is there a maximum range on infrared scopes? So you have not exhausted me yet, Thomas, and just for the record, infrared stuff is more or less what I do for a living, right? I used to develop microbolometers, thermal NVGs, and all that sort of stuff for Raytheon and a few other places. They're getting quite good. And while I'm gone, I just took delivery, a loaner of a Trigicon 60mm Reaper, which is very, very good. It's about 10 grand or close to it. There are quite a few others that are good. The really good stuff right now is stuff like the Trigon Reaper and Envision Halo LR. The lower, less expensive stuff is quite good, getting quite good, much better, but nothing under 3K is really worth it. And all of the infrared stuff is still comparatively low resolution. I'm probably going to do a live cast on thermal scopes at some point to give you guys a little bit more theory and stuff like this. For starters, so I did an article for Guns and Ammo called Infrared 101. And I think they printed it in a couple of magazines. I occasionally repeat it, sort of a little bit of a basic primer on how to look at night vision and thermal scopes. That's probably a good start. And chime in or leave me a note under the video in the comments. I need to think through this a little bit. Thermal scopes are slightly different in the way you look at them, and the technology is changing comparatively rapidly. So I think I should do a separate live cast on that and really go through how it works. The basic problem with thermal scopes is that the image you're looking at looks substantially different from a typical image you see with your naked eye. Something called a thermograph, when you're essentially looking at the thermal map. And one of the things that makes it look so different is the fact that even high-end expensive thermal scopes still have comparatively low resolution, right? $8,000-9,000 Trigon Reaper or Envision Halo is still only a 640 by 480 pixel image sensor, thermal image sensor, basically VGA resolution. And that is not a ton. Low resolution combined with some particularities of it being a heat map, effectively, make this image harder to digest. And there is this odd effect. Remember, so I've seen a ton of different thermal rifle scopes. Vast majority of them are not going to be available to the public anytime in the next, God knows how many years. And there's an interesting effect. Once thermal scopes go into high resolution, the images start looking a lot more normal, a lot more natural. So I'm very curious to see how it's going to go with lower resolution images. And sometime mid-year, I was planning to look at them a little bit, and I want to look at the clip-ons. I want to look at Leica's Colornox, and now I'm looking at Trigon, and I looked at Envision Halo LR last year. So there are some interesting things happening, but still, if you're really on a budget, this is not the type of a device you should be really digging into. Okay. I'm sorry if that didn't give you everything you need, but it's a big topic and something I should not do lightly. I should think through it and do it properly. Lee. Okay, thank you, Lee. I really appreciate your kind words. This is sort of my shtick. I don't have a very large audience, but I have what I think is a very intelligent audience. So I don't like to dumb things down too much. If I give you an answer, I want it to be reasoned, well thought out, and most importantly, actionable. I'm not looking to just force my take on you. I'm looking to explain how to arrive to reasonable conclusions. That's one of the things that makes me wordy, and probably one of the things that's going to keep my audience always fairly small. But I'd rather take a small number of you guys than a much larger number of people who are looking for simplicity. I'm not good at simplicity. Fundamentals, yes. Simplicity, probably no. Okay, let's see. Christopher Irwin. Considering the Swamp Fox 4 to 24 by 50, probably 4 to 20 by 50. Do they have, oh, yeah, no, they haven't. They do have a Kentucky long 4 to 24. Okay, for mid to long range budget hunting scope. I watched your Swamp Fox 1 to 10 and 5 to 30 favorable reviews. Thoughts on a Kentucky long series for hunting? The rifle currently has a PST Gen 2 3 to 15 by 44, which I like quite a bit, but looking for higher mag range, but not less than 4 power on low end. Honestly, for a budget hunting scope, what you have is very, very good. I mean, different folks, different strokes. I don't like a ton of magnification on a hunting scope, and PST Gen 2 3 to 15 is very, very good. The Swamp Fox Kentucky Long will give you more magnification, but the same magnification, it's not a step up. To step up, you need to go to something else. That having been said, if you are looking for a little bit more magnification on a budget, I like the Kentucky Long. I think it's a good scope. But if you're looking for a step up in performance from PST Gen 2, you need to jump up higher. Right, Kentucky Long is very nice, but it's not better than PST Gen 2. I think PST Gen 2 is a little bit better. It's more comparable to Swamp Fox's Warhawk and scopes like that. Even then, it's not close. And the 3 to 15 by 44 seems to be kind of the cherry of the PST Gen 2 line. I'm not sure if this is a change that I would make, but Kentucky long scopes are quite good, and if the reticles work for you, I don't see any problems really with doing that. Any idea why Nikon left rifle scope business? They made popular scopes. Ooh. See, I'm in a hotel room and there's no alcohol here. Normally, this is the kind of question that would drive me into booze. Nikon rifle scopes was a marketing engine, nothing else. They never designed or manufactured any of their own rifle scopes, at least not for a long time. Maybe at some point something in Japan, but not since I've been in this. The Nikon category was sort of, they were never the innovator. They had a lot of name recognition and good marketing muscle. So the way Nikon functioned, they basically would just get an idea that somebody developed and then flood the market with scopes and use the marketing to sell them. The basic problem is that their customer service wasn't very good. They didn't offer anything particularly innovative. And as the market expanded and a lot more players came in, Nikon simply could not compete. There was nothing special about their scopes. And Nikon corporate always hated everything related to guns. They're not exactly pro-gun people. So they kept stuff that doesn't go in a gun and got rid of everything else. That's basically it. But fundamentally, they left the scope business because they weren't making money on it. Other people were beating them at their own game, left, right, and sideways. Okay. Thomas Shoemaker, that was a great explanation. I would enjoy picking your brain about infrared spotlights paired with infrared lenses and coatings, if it's possible. So I don't know a huge amount about infrared spotlights available to the consumer, so that's something I would need to do a little bit of digging. We can certainly talk about infrared lenses and coatings. Infrared by itself is sort of a broad field because what we call night vision goggle is infrared for the most part, but it's near infrared. It behaves very similarly to visible light, but although you can't see it with the naked eye. Thermal rifle scopes are a very different wavelength range. And the type of light, the type of radiation you're looking at is very different. When you're looking at thermal scopes, especially at night, what you're looking for is emitted radiation, where all warm bodies, which is something that's not the same temperature as the background, sticks out. While once you're talking about infrared spotlights and stuff like that, you're talking about near-infrared illuminators, where the light you're looking at is reflected, right? It's something called the structured light approach. You are using an illuminator, which where the near-infrared light bounces off whatever it is you're looking at, and your imaging optic of some sort picks it up. These work very differently, but with near-infrared stuff, I'm not really up to speed on what's commercially available. But if you have a specific question, we'll give it a shot and I'll see what I can do. Phil, can you discuss perceived field of view versus actual field of view, and why sometimes the scope, or maybe lesser quality, may seem to have a better image? Yes, within reason. This is another one of those not such a simple question. Excuse me, I managed to hurt my wrist, so if I turn it the wrong way, it's really painful. So there is no such thing as really perceived field of view. The term you're probably looking for, tell me if that's not the case. The term you're probably looking for is apparent field of view. Apparent field of view is basically how large the image in front of your eye appears to be. For example, it is to a significant degree a function of diameter of the eyepiece and the eye relief of a scope. Right, something with shorter eye relief for the same size eyepiece will look larger to your eye. But there are two parts to this one. It will look larger, so it's going to be somewhat relaxing. It feels more of the natural field of view of your eye. And also, less stray light from around the rifle scope will be coming to your eye. So you can have a better image fidelity, not only because the image coming to your eye is better, but also because there is less unrelated information coming into your eye from everywhere else, right? For example, if there is a eyepiece here, if your eyepiece is this far away, you see a lot of stuff around it. That will make the image you're getting through the eyepiece look worse, even if it's very high quality. Moving the same eyepiece closer, other than looking bigger, you also see less stuff around it. I don't know if this was a good demonstration, but I hope that makes sense. Okay. A really good example of this approach, there's a British company called MTC. They make rifle scopes, primarily for air guns, various Chinese rifle scopes, but fairly decent ones. And they have this line called, I think, Viper Connect or something like that. Yeah, I have one of those scopes, and it has an eyepiece, like an eyepiece from a binocular. So it's very short eye relief and super wide field of view. It's not a very high-end scope, but the image fidelity looking through it is much better than the price would suggest, because your eye is so close to the eyepiece, it's all your eye sees is whatever is coming through the scope, with minimal, if any, information coming from other things. And that really helps your brain interpret the image, make sense of it, and figure out what's happening. Okay. I hope that answers your question. Okay. All right. And I have a coffee and a couple more. Okay. So if you guys don't have anything in the comments right now, I can go see if there are any questions that I didn't answer that were asked of me on Instagram, Facebook, or on Sniper's Hide. Let's see. Okay. Got it. So I had a question come via Instagram regarding March low power variable scopes, because it's not always apparent what they are. So there are 4 of them. The question specifically was about the March 1 to 10, but there are 2 March 1 to 10 rifle scopes. So the original low power variable scope from March was a second focal plane, 1 to 10 by 24. With side focus, which is a very nice scope, but it was not designed for super speed and 1 power. It was basically just a very flexible design. It was the first 10 power reactor ratio scope on the market list that I can think of, I think. Then March made a 1 to 8 by 24 conventional looking low power variable, also with side focus. And this one was front focal plane. Neither one of these two scopes had a truly day bright illumination, but they're quite competent designs. I've played with both of them quite a bit. They had these for sale for quite a few years, and they've generally done well. But if you're looking for the bright reticle illumination and them being very, very fast on one power, neither one was it. Their big shtick was really a flexibility. Then March figured out a way to do. Then they figured out a way to do an even shorter rifle scope design, and they created a scope called 1 to 8 by 24 short. You actually own one of those. It does not have side focus, but it's really short and it's fairly light. It's optically very good, and for the application I have it on, it works quite nicely. The next generation, the latest that's just coming out now, of the short design from March, is a front focal plane 1 to 10 by 24 rifle scope, which also has side focus, and it has a dual focal plane reticle. So there is a very bright illuminated dot in the second focal plane. And there is a little bit of the ranging hashes in the front focal plane. So as far as general purpose LPVO goes, that is one of the better scopes available in the market right now, but there's some pretty stiff competition there. So when you are looking at the March 1 to 10, you kind of need to decide if you're looking for more of a general purpose scope with a second focal plane reticle, which is the original 1 to 10, or if you're looking for more of a tactical AR type scope with a bright dot, that would be the 1 to 10 short. It costs a little bit more money, and that's the newer, more recent design. Right, Lee has a comment. Considering that the over 800-yard shots are unlikely for Razor Gen 3 POU rifle setup, investment in the parallax adjustment is probably not useful for customers. Just my newbie opinion. Quite possibly. It really depends on how you set it up, right? If you have it on a typical 556 and you don't shoot past 800 with any regularity, it might not make sense. But if you're setting it up on a 6.5 Grendel or 6mm arc, yes, to most customers, 6.5 Grendel, 6mm arc that from the same platform can reach further and might be called upon to reach further, then it might be more useful. I don't think Vortex should be setting them up with 300-yard parallax like I got mine set up as a standard. I think what they have going right now, 150 yards or thereabouts, is a very good. It is a good compromise setting. However, for my particular application, it was worthwhile, so I did it. Right, your mileage may vary. In principle, one of the better setups is probably something like what Minox did with the ZP8 1 to 8 by 24. The way that scope is set up, when you are, I think, below 2 power, I think it's below 2 power or something like that, it is focused at 25 yards. And when you go above 2 power or 2.5, something like that, the parallax distance shifts, and now it becomes focused at 300 yards. I think that's a very, very good way of doing this. And probably for scope of this type, I think it's a very viable alternative to side focus like a March Shorty 1 to 10 has. But both approaches work just fine. Okay. All right, guys, if you have any more questions, now's the time. I'm gonna take a look and see what else has been sent to me that I have not answered. All right, a gentleman from Florida, who is originally from Poland, asked me a few questions here and there. Okay, so, and he has a follow-up. He's asking about the primary arms 6 to 30 by 56 front focal plane scope from Platinum series. It is actually a rather nice design, but I haven't spent a ton of time with it. It's made in a very well-respected Japanese factory. So if you find it and get a good deal, it will do quite well. It has a nice scope from what I can tell, but it's not the scope I've spent a ton of time with. Generally, what the gentleman's name is Sebastian, I believe, has asked me, he was looking at a general purpose scope that would do well for long range precision and for hunting and stuff like that. So I tried to steer him toward a 4-20 by 50, like a ZCOM 4-20, March 30-24, scopes of that type for general purpose use. All right, we've got a couple new questions. Thomas Shoemaker. I'm in eastern North Carolina and I hunt a 15,000 acre bean fields. I killed a bear at 15 yards and a coyote at 982 yards this season. Scopes can really do a lot for long range shooting, but what about bullets for hunting? I wish Derek was still here. He'd probably have a lot of opinions on bullets. If you hand load, I would really strongly recommend taking a look at a company called Badlands Precision. They make a bullet called Bulldozer. It's a somewhat unusual profile, but it works really well. Starts out fast, carries velocity very well, and opens very nicely. These are monolithic bullets with aluminum tips. I've been using them on and off for quite a good amount of time. And if you're trying to, for long range hunting, I could think of much worse options. Okay. Almost any high quality modern bullet will work well. And there are plenty of good ones. From what little that I have seen, modern bullets with aluminum or polymer tip are generally your best bet for this kind of flexibility in terms of engagement at different distances, stuff like that. Okay. Going to sleep. Good night, Lee. The mechanism behind the swap parallax feature. Then again, I'm a big nerd and electrical engineer. Yeah, there's no real rocket science to it. It's just the reticle stays where it is, and the objective lens moves forward just ever so slightly by a very specific predetermined distance. So to reset parallax in a fixed parallax scope, they open up the objective, and the way the objective lens is set up, they're able to reposition it very so slightly and then lock it down again, and they've got a test bench where they can check what parallax distance this is set at. Not terribly complicated. Do you know how to sharpen D2 steel on knives? Yes. You take a high quality sharpener and sharpen. I'm gonna do a proper video with the guy from Omaha Outdoors. Generally, D2 steel is not terribly hard to sharpen. As far as sharpening goes, there are two things that are important. You have to be able to maintain a consistent angle for the bevels, and you have to have patience. Sharpening is usually ruined by being in a rush. Okay. If I can try to offer a more concrete recommendation, but you probably should tell me what kind of sharpening setup you have. If you're new at this, don't try to do this freehand. I remember, as I recall, you have a very nice D2 knife. If you're learning to do this freehand, learn on a cheaper knife. If you have some sort of a jig or proper sharpening system, then it's a different ballgame. So let me know what you have, and I can try to offer a recommendation. If I wanted to save money and buy something cheaper than Trigicon MRO, what would you recommend? So with red dot sights, in terms of what you get for the money right now, there's a ton of options, a ton of good options. Holosun stuff looks very good. Obviously, if made in China bothers you, then a lot of all the best for the best bang for the buck red dot sites right now come out of China. So if China is a problem for you, then there are not too many good options. So there's still some. The Holosun stuff is quite good. From what I've seen, 6-hour Romeo 4H and 4T are quite good. And they are assembled in the US, but I assume it's mostly Chinese components, but their assembly and alignment and everything is done in the US. I happen to really like Trigicon. Trigicon is good. I happen to really like Shield sights from UK. And for a small type of sight, Shield SIS is very good. It's a conceptually different thing from MRO. MRO tries to give you a large objective in a compact sight. SIS gives you a fairly small window, but the housing almost works like an aiming aperture when you need to, and it really works nicely. Both work quite well. So if you don't want made in China, Shield in the UK is worth looking at. For the various Chinese scopes, there are several. So I just took delivery of Burris Fastfire 4, and it looks like a very nice little red dot sight. It's kind of it's technically it's an open meter sight, but it has with this clip-on housing that works quite well. Swamp Fox Optics has really made great strides with their red dot sights in terms of bang for the buck. They might be the one to beat. Lately, I've been kind of getting more interested in red dot sights that have solar panels. So I have a Holosun sight like that, but also I'm going to be looking at the Vortex Spark Solar or whatever it's called, the new tube style red dot sight that has a small solar panel on top. There are good options. Trichicken MRO is a very good red dot sight, but it is expensive. And red dot sights fundamentally are fairly simple devices. So you don't have to spend a lot of money on a very, very decent product if you really don't want to. What else is good? Leica Tempus has very, very good collimation quality and generally nice, simple red dot sight. Crimson Trace has a couple of new ones coming out. They're really good options. So if you are saying what would you want to buy that's cheaper than Trigicon MRO, well, I mean, that's not a lot of specificity. Tell me what real price range you're looking in, and whether you want a simple aiming dot or some more sophisticated reticle, something like that. That will really drive the recommendation. Thomas Shoemaker, would you be interested in making a video about the history of rifle scopes and why we use more mills and how we discovered the system? Yeah, if you guys are interested, I can certainly do it. We didn't really discover the system. More mills, angular units have been used for aiming forever and a day. I mean, iron sights work in exactly the same way. All these kind of aiming things were used for artillery in the military forever and a day. Its use in rifle scopes is slightly more recent, but the system was not discovered. It was just sort of transferred from other disciplines. The whole business about aiming and stuff like that is very old for us. In many ways, our visual cortex developed because of the need to aim. We are fundamentally aiming animals. And aiming means thinking about stuff in terms of angular units. That's not new. But like I said, if you guys are interested, say so in the comments, and I'll put something together. That could be a fun little project. I would likely enjoy that. Okay, let's see. While you guys are coming up with more questions, I'll see what else I have in the Okay, so there is a gentleman, interestingly, who asked me if there is something cheaper than an MRO that might work, and I recommended some Holosun 503s and all that. And earlier today, he sent me a picture that he got a Holosun. It looks like it's a 515 or something like that. I need to take a look. What is it? Yeah. So it's one of the larger Holosun red dots. He seems to be happy with it, but he just got it. So yeah, Holosun, in terms of what you get for the money, is quite good right now. No question. What red dot would you recommend for astigmatism? Honestly, if you have strong astigmatism, I would not recommend the red dot at all. If you really want astigmatism, go get yourself a prismatic scope, something like a Swamp Fox blade or something along those lines. With astigmatism, no red dot is going to be perfect. I have mild astigmatism, so I use red dot sights quite comfortably. But I also like to use them with magnifiers and stuff like that, which really helps. And at close range, astigmatism doesn't bother me. But my astigmatism is mild. If yours is more than mild, then it may be worth your while to look into other sites. So the first initial thing to try is holographics. Holographics play a little bit better with astigmatism, but it's not ideal. And if that doesn't work, the 1-power prismatic scopes are worth looking at. From what I've seen so far, I think Swamp Fox Blade is your best bet. Primary Arms has a new one coming out. I haven't seen it yet, but it looks promising from what I've gathered. So we'll see. But like I said, if your astigmatism really bothers you, maybe not a red dot sight, maybe prismatic or holographic is your best bet. All right, we've got second a vote for the MOA meal history lecture. All right, I'll see what I can do, gentlemen. That's not too difficult to do. I just need to figure out a reasonable way to do it in a visual manner. Okay. All right, let's see what else I got. So I don't think I have any more. Okay, there is go. So there's a gentleman from Arizona. I don't know if he wants me to mention his name, so I won't. But basically, he lives in a small town somewhere, and he's looking on a scope for his new rifle build that's in 300 PRC. He does not have a chance to see too many high-end rifle scopes around where he is. So his question is, do you have any advice on scopes I could look into? I do not have a budget, and weight does not bother me. I currently use Swarovski binoculars, and they agree with my eyes nicely. Okay. Well, honestly, if you're looking for a high-end rifle scope to do a little bit of everything, there is a good number of options, right? And if your budget is flexible, and there's a Tangent Theta, Z-Comp, Schmidt and Bender, Steiner, you name it, right? For this kind of quote-unquote general purpose use, where it's both long-range shooting and hunting, my almost natural recommendation would be for something like a 4-20 by 50 or thereabouts. March has now released a 4.5 to 28 by 52, which weighs right around 30 ounces, reasonably compact and good optically. That might be, if you want the real, true crossover design, a little bit of everything, that might be the one to beat together with the 4-20 Z comp. If you don't need a ton of magnification, the scope I've been using for similar purposes has been a Tangent Theta 3-15 by 50, the M model with a 30mm tube. So I'd be looking between these three probably March, Z-comp, and tangent theta, depending on what magnification range appeals to you the most. Okay. All right, let's see what else I got. Okay, I've answered this one. So this one, all right. So there is a gentleman who actually lives in my neck of the woods, not too far from me in New Mexico. And he has the following question. I plan on putting together a Voodoo rifle for PRS style rimfire matches. I've been using a Tikka T1X and it has been good. I have an Athlon Midas TAC 6-24 and it has been a great scope, and I really like the center dot reticle. I think the Voodoo probably deserves something better. I'm looking for the best bang for the buck. Vortex Razor is too heavy. I saw your video comparing Chronos and Ares ETR, and you kind of convinced me I probably don't need the Chronos for daytime PRS style matches or shooting off the bench, and the shorter rimfire distances. Yeah, that's probably fair. But now they have Gen 2 with better turrets. I have noticed Vortex PST Gen 2s are going for $829 at your Optic. Do you think this is comparable to the ETR scope at a lower price point? I'm a cheapskate and I don't want to spend over $2K. If you have any other suggestions, I am all ears. All right. Yeah, of course I have suggestions. I always have suggestions. That's what I do here. So first of all, PST Gen 2 is a very, very nice scope. But for target type shooting and stuff like that, Ares ETR for this kind of application is probably slightly better. It does a little bit better at high magnification, which with rimfire you might actually use sometimes. And the reticle is fairly thin. For me, the Ares ETR reticle is a little bit too thin. But they've got a new reticle design in some of the new Ares ETR scopes called, I think, APLR6 that should fix that, but I haven't seen it yet. I will fairly soon. Okay. For this kind of application, I'd probably be looking at Athlon Ares ETR, a Miopta Optica 6 stuff, and taking half a step down, Titan Element 5-25x56 is definitely worth a look. Slightly less expensive, but it might be a better bang for the buck. Hard to say. But these are the scopes I'd probably be looking at. Yeah, I think, the Vortex Strike Eagle is also in there for a little bit less money. The 5-25x56 and a few others. Okay. I hope that answers your questions. If you're listening, please tell me if this answers your question in any way, shape, or form. But I think you're generally on the right path in terms of the scopes you're looking at. Okay. Let's see what else do I have. All right, I've got a question here from a new subscriber, Bill Condilis. Do you have any experience with the colorless Helia red dot sight? No, none whatsoever. So I generally have good relationships with most rifle scope companies. Unfortunately, some of them don't have a good relationship with me. Colorless happens to be one of them, so I have not had a chance to see this particular site yet. I'm afraid I can't offer anything useful on this. Sorry about that. Okay. What else do I have? That's been answered. That's been answered. Okay. I think most of the stuff that I have has been answered. This is repetitive. Oh, so this is actually a good question. I answered it, but a gentleman has a AR-15 pistol with a 10.5-inch barrel. He's trying to figure out what scope to put on it, and he was looking at the March 1-10 shorty, but and he has several high-quality, low-power variables to look at. Personally, on short barrel short barrel rifles or AR-15 pistols, I really like prismatic scopes with piggybacked offset red dots, exactly because they're much shorter. I don't like it when a scope sticks out almost all the way to the muzzle, and usually these are not exactly used for 1,000-yard shooting, although some are capable of it miraculously enough. So I would be, for application like that, for a short barrel rifle, I'd be looking at a red dot with magnifier, or a more likely a prismatic with a piggybacked offset red dot sight. I think that screws up the balance of an AR-15 pistol less and generally matches the gun better. Thomas, at what variable optic magnification would you justify using a FFP scope over an SFP scope, e.g. 3-12 versus 6-24? So for my personal use, if the budget allows it, the front focal plane scopes for same money and everything tend to be more expensive. I generally prefer front focal plane to second focal plane designs for everything other than target shooting, that kind of stuff. For general purpose hunting, it doesn't matter that much, basically shooting within a point blank range. But aside from that, as long as the reticle pattern and reticle illumination are well designed, I tend to lean toward front focal plane more often than not. Now, with a second focal plane, scopes, I'd prefer to have them with basically small magnification ranges. But by and large, given a choice, I almost always go FFP. I tend to shoot far off. And I tend to shoot far off, and I like holding for wind, and having a consistent reticle size makes a difference for me. Joe is here. Hi, Joe. I'm doing a move and found a bunch of ammo. Should I sell or epic range day? You should bring it to Albuquerque, and we will have an epic range day together. How about that? I think that's a good idea. All right, heavy 65. Why the LHT 3-15x42 and not 3-15x50? Any optical reason, or just form factor, or something else? Both are very good. The 3-15x42 to me, optically during the day, looks ever so slightly better and has ever so slightly better depth of field, although not by much. The 3-15x50 does have a slight edge at night, but if it's not a dedicated low light scope, I mean, I'd probably go with a slightly smaller one, and because it's also a little bit easier to mount lower and all that. But both are quite good. The biggest difference, arguably, is the reticle. The 3-15x50 has a G4 reticle, which I like a lot. I was involved with conceiving it. While the 3-15x44 has a comparatively simple milliradian hash reticle. For pure hunting, 3-15, the G4 works very, very well. But for general purpose use, a little bit of everything. The milliradian scale reticle in the HSR5 mill or something like that, whatever it's called, in the 3-15x42, I think that's just a more flexible design. But both are nice scopes. I have both, and I like them quite a bit. Lee, I just about had him coming to Albuquerque to go shooting with me using his ammo. Please don't screw this up for me. Yeah, I'd like you to retract this. And for the record, I don't think ammo is going to become substantially more available in a year. I'm afraid it will take longer than that. I think most big manufacturers' backlog right now is probably close to a year. That means it'll take them a year to make enough ammunition just to fulfill existing orders. That does not take into account new orders. So it'll take a little while to get more ammo. True, 3 years. Yeah, 3 years sounds reasonable. It might be faster. We don't know how the demand is going to change. There are reverberations that our esteemed new administration is planning to push through some sort of a severe ammunition restriction, in addition to assault weapon ban and a bunch of other fun stuff. So if they do manage to push stuff through, it's going to be crazy for more than 3 years. We, at this stage, we simply do not know. Pardon me. My optimism got away with me. Yeah, we may be able to buy ammo in 3 years. And that these days passes for optimism, gentlemen. Lord Almighty. All right, folks. I'll give it a few more minutes, and if you guys don't have any more questions, I'll wrap it up. It's been about an hour and a half when I originally set out to do this livecast today. I figured I'll have enough energy for a couple hours, and that's probably the case. So I'll stick around for another 20 minutes if you have questions. I will quickly look through my private messages on the hide and see if there's anything else offhand that I didn't answer. If you are from the hide and there is something that I didn't answer for you, please put it in the comments. Remind me. And we'll go from there. Okay, this is all answered. Okay. Yeah, amazingly, the only couple of calibers I see available are 260 Remington and 6mm Creedmoor, stuff like that. So, I mean, I have some. I stocked up before I left California because this whole ammo crisis is not an uncommon thing for California. But I'm shooting a lot of air guns on Dreamfire just in case. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's sad, but unfortunately true. Yes, but I'm also optimistic about the Supreme Court as it pertains to new laws sticking. Well, it takes a long time for a particular case to get to the Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court has to be willing to listen to it. Prior to it getting to a Supreme Court, if you have to get some lower court judge to put a temporary restraint on a law so that it doesn't go into effect. It can kind of go either way, right? The judge can can stop a particular law until a higher court hears it and makes a judgment, or a lower court judge can say, okay, this is in place until a higher court sees it and makes a judgment. So while a particular lawsuit, I'm sure if Biden passes something particularly stupid, and there will be a bunch of lawsuits, while these lawsuits are making their way through the court system, it's not at all clear on how it's going to go in the meantime. Okay. Circuit split required. Yes, that's correct. Do you have PCP guns? Are they a pain to refill? Yes, I have PCP guns, and they're not a pain to refill. So if you are new to air guns and you want to shoot, accurate and fairly quiet PCPs, there is an initial investment in getting them refilled. So there are basically 3 ways of doing this. There's a manual pump. I've tried that. It was good for a while, and I think I gained 30 pounds when I stopped doing that. Good exercise. You can get a scuba tank and deal with that. I'm not a scuba diver, I didn't want to do that. Or you can get one of those small compressors that can run off of your car or off of a wall socket that will just directly refill your PCP, which is what I got. I got an Air Venturi Nomad 2, but there are several different options. And once you buy one, it's not a pain at all. It's pretty straightforward. Okay. And to follow up on that, do you really need a special air compressor for the PCP, or can you get an adapter for a shop compressor? No, shop compressor by itself will not do it for you. PCPs are precharged to considerably higher pressure. I think your best bet is to get one of these small portable compressors. I think they are usually, I think, in the $600 to $700 range, which is a good amount of money. But once you get it all set up, pellets don't cost a lot of money, and if you shoot in any sort of volume, you'll recoup your costs very fast. Okay. Mr. T-shirt is here. Got here late. T-shirt is great. Any opinion on the Bushnell DMR 2 3.5 to 21? I'm glad you like the T-shirt. I'm glad it finally made it there. The DMR 2 3.5 to 21 is actually a pretty nice scope. The original DMR varied considerably. Then there was a Pro, and then there is a 2. I think that was the sequence. It was the 2, then a Pro. But all the subsequent ones were a little more consistent. I think the scope is a little bit heavier than I like. And I prefer the illuminated version, but it is a good scope. And I've seen it for very good prices from Midway, from Cameraland, New York, and a few other places. So it's a good deal. It's a good scope. Schmidt and Bender PM2 4 to 16 by 50 has a total of 19.3 mils of elevation, but with a 20 MOA rail, it is still 2.5 mil high at 100 yards. Normal, scope problem, or rail problem? It's very hard to say offhand. It can be any of them. I wouldn't expect it to be a scope problem. It can be either a rail problem or a gun problem. I've seen more than one gun that the way it's screwed into the receiver is a little bit off and stuff like that. If you have another scope and normal rings, or just another scope that will fit in the same rings, the simplest way to do this is just to pop another scope in there. And if that has the same problem, that will immediately tell you it's not the scope, right? And then you can either swap out the rail or see what's happening with the gun. If the gun generally shoots accurately, it doesn't shift its point of impact when it's hot, then your best bet, and assuming everything else works out okay, your best bet is to either try a different rail or get a set of Burris XTR signature rings with those plastic inserts, and just use the inserts to get the zero position that works for you. I got a crossbow from a COVID lockdown, quiet home security. Yeah, it's generally not a bad idea. In my case, the quiet home security is me. Shooting somebody with a crossbow would probably be more charitable. Way Crouch HW45, amazing air pistol. Yeah, I haven't tried it. I've heard good things about it. I need to do another show on air guns with Tyler Patner and Cyclops Joe. Those guys know a lot more about air guns than I do, but I'm slowly getting in there. It's an interesting topic, and you can do a lot of fun things with air guns. And our esteemed politicians haven't yet figured out that what air guns can do, so they're not regulating them yet. So to all of you guys, if you don't own a couple of good quality air guns at a couple of different calibers, my recommendation would be to look into it and see if this is something you want to mess with. before they start banning those two. I'm sure they'll get to it at some point in the not too distant future. All right, gentlemen, 15 minutes left. What else you got? Let's see. What else do I have? Okay. I've answered this, I've answered this. Okay, over the stuff that's unanswered, that was in my private messages, that's not a replication of other questions. I think I've covered everything I had. So I'm probably going to stick around for a couple more minutes, and if you guys don't have anything else you'd like me to address right now, I will call this a night and go to sleep. I had a long day. I woke up at 4 in the morning in Los Angeles. Now it's 8:45 in Dallas. So it's been an interesting day. Here we go. Joe, oh, in the ammo I found there was a brick of Aguila Sniper Subsonic, and I've got a Remington 41P for that. That is very cool. Yeah, I have some amount of Aguila Sniper Subsonic. That's that 60 grain ammo. Quite a few of my rimfires, it doesn't stabilize well. I was actually thinking about getting a 1-9 twist barrel for my for one of my Ruger 1022s to do better with heavier subsonic Aguila. Yeah, if you decide you don't want it, take it with you to your new home. I'm gonna come visit sometime. I'll be happy to buy it from you. Okay. Thomas Shoemaker, new subscriber. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you for your kind words. As I've mentioned earlier, I'm trying to do something a little bit different from my channel with my channel, and for my sort of a blog written website, I have a website at on locals. It's darklordofoptics.locals.com, or just Dark Lord of Optics. Do swing by. A lot of stuff that I write is there. My content is kind of spread all over the web, and I'm all over the web, and I'm trying to be a little bit more organized with it. Not always successfully, but I do the best I can. Okay. All right, gentlemen. 1 hour 47 minutes. We are coming to the logical conclusion. Oh, there we go, Mark. Perhaps a little out of the lane, but 6mm Creedmoor. How short of barrel length would be practical for 750 to 1,000 yards? We had good luck with 308 and 16-inch barrels to 770 yards last week. Any practical barrel length, 6mm Creedmoor starts out fairly fast. It's an overball caliber, so it's not going to be terribly efficient out of a 16-inch barrel, but it'll make it to be supersonic past 1,000 yards without any real issues. The overbore calibers do a little bit better with longer tubes, but if you're not itching to get the most velocity, and if you're only shooting to 1,000 yards, you don't need that much with high quality 6mm bullets. I think 16, 18-inch barrel will be fine. That will be a little loud. You'll waste a little powder, but not that much. Not as much as you think. Okay. I generally like slightly shorter questions, slightly shorter barrels. Lee. Don't answer this now, please get a good sleep, but I was wondering, what is the mechanism behind the March front focal plate designs that are also lightweight? So why shouldn't I answer this now? When I promised I'll be here for another 10 minutes. There is, I did a couple of videos on this, on objective lens sizes and stuff like that. So this is much easier to sketch than to answer. March is generally very good in making lightweight scopes. A lot of it is just know-how. The way they cement all the different optical elements inside is a little bit different, so the fixturing doesn't have to be as heavy. They cement every lens element inside, which makes a difference in terms of how much weight you need. But it ultimately all starts with objective lens. If you are willing to make a slightly shorter objective lens system, you sacrifice a little bit of depth of field, and field of view gets a little bit harder. But the other part of this compromise, what you gain, is that you can make things a little bit shorter and lighter. Traditionally, March scopes did not have a very wide field of view, but these latest designs do have good field of view while retaining fairly compact size and everything. As an example, the original March 3-24 by 52, which I have, is lighter than the latest March 4.5-28 by 52. Same objective lens, but the 4.5-28, despite having a smaller erector ratio, is actually a little bit heavier than the 3-24. Why? Because I asked them to do this with somewhat greater depth of field, so they increase the focal length of the objective lens, and now it cannot be quite as trim, but it's still trim. It's still a good compromise. Fundamentally, part of it is March's expertise and know-how, but the big part of it is design choices. If you're designing for that and you're willing to sacrifice a couple other things to some degree, you can go lighter. It really depends on your basic requirements. Okay. Illuminated reticles, is it a must or not? It depends. With front focal plane scopes with large erector ratios, I like illuminated reticles, primarily because they are easier to see, make the reticle a lot easier to see on low power. But with some other designs, with good designs reticles, I don't know. Given the state of modern rifle scope making, once we get to $1,000 or so and go higher, I really like to have an illuminated reticle. And I think at that stage, I really prefer that. At lower prices, I'm not so sure how critical that is or how much value I put on it if it sacrifices something else, right? No, March does not grind their own glass, and most manufacturers do not. There are some exceptions to this, but vast majority of the manufacturers don't grind their own glass. They order lenses of specific prescriptions from other manufacturers that specialize on grinding lenses. All right. So yeah, as far as March goes, for Lee's question and limited field of view, yeah. So let me know if you think this answer makes sense to you. If not, once again, this is a kind of thing where I can do a video in front of a whiteboard so I can sketch, and that might make more sense. I need to do a few more of those with a whiteboard, more of a type of an explanation of what's inside the rifle scope and stuff like that. All right, gentlemen, I think we are getting to the logical conclusion of this thing. I really appreciate all of you who stuck around here with me for these couple of hours. As Lee has correctly pointed out, I'm kind of running out of juice here. So I'm going to wrap this up and go to sleep. I have another work day tomorrow. Then tomorrow night I get on a plane again and finally go home. So there is one last question, and Mr. Scott Farkas, best low power variable for a 16-inch Aero Precision 308 build. How much money are you willing to spend, right? Best low power variable, Schmidt 1 to 8 by 24 DLCC. Is it the best one for the money? I don't know. If you have $4,500 to spend, maybe. My nearly standard answer these days for high quality low power variable for accurate semi-automatic rifles, barring some very specific requirements, is Vortex Razor Gen 3 1 to 10 by 24. It is $2,000. It's still a lot of money. There we go. $1,500, $2,000. Get a Razor Gen 3 1 to 10 and be done with it. It's a great scope. It'll work well for you. Okay. All right. Lee, good night, sir. Thank you for good questions. Mark, much appreciate your time here. I do these every 2 weeks. Swing by, ask questions. I enjoy this kind of stuff. Joe, yeah, please do, and I'll schedule my epic trip to your epic range day. Mr. Scoot Farkas, that's an interesting name. Thank you for chiming in, and good night. So as I wrap up, swing by my website. All my different announcements and stuff are there. darklordofoptics.locals.com or just darklordofoptics.com. As I have mentioned in the past, it is my honest belief that my days at Facebook and YouTube are likely numbered. They will eventually get rid of all the people like me. I will stick around for as long as I can. But if they do ban all of us, I do have a path to retreat. Okay. All right. I noticed that Gilberto asked one final question, and I do have 3 minutes left from my self-imposed cutoff time. The way they did the internal components, they were just heavy. They had a very particular design. When they first did this, it was an unusual design. Wasn't anything quite like this, and they may have overdone it a little bit. They were able to move a couple of things around and lighten things and do basically the same thing with Gen 2E at a lot more moderate weight. But one of the things that makes the Razor Gen 2 heavy is the size of the eyepiece and how good the eyepiece is. Glass is expensive, and glass weighs a lot, more so than aluminum. Anyhow, gentlemen, good night. Good night, all of you. Thank you for chiming in. I'll be back at this 2 weeks from now. I'll make an announcement on the topic a few days before I do so. Good night.